Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'm just going to give it 1 or 2 minutes for people to log in here. Okay, hi everyone, and thanks for tuning in today. My name is Maggie Downing. I'm the manager of digital imaging at the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. Today's webinar on equipment selection is the 6th and final episode in our Digitization 101 series. Today's webinar and all of the webinars in this series are being recorded and will be available on YouTube. So we'll send a link out to all of the registrants for today's webinar when it's been posted in the next day or two. And then we'll also send you a link to all the other videos in the series. So as always, I will try to answer a few questions at the end, and I'll also include my email address, and you can feel free to email me with any follow-up questions you may have. So many of the images that I'm using in today's slides are from the CERN Organization for Nuclear Research. So I've found some cool old equipment photos, so I hope you enjoy them. Last week we talked about how to decide whether to scan in-house or to outsource your digitization project. So today I'm going to talk about equipment selection for those of you who want to keep your operation in-house. I'll discuss some common types of imaging equipment and what they're used for, including flatbed scanners, camera and copy stand setups, and specialty scanners. And as I discuss these different types of equipment, I'll also say a few words about software programs that will support each type of setup. And then I'll spend a couple minutes talking about equipment calibration targets. So first, I just want to talk about flatbed scanners. Pictured here is my humble at-home scanner, since I've been developing all of these webinars from my home office. There are lots of advantages to working with flatbed scanners. For one thing, they are generally pretty small and can fit on a desk or a table in a small space. A scanner is a nice enclosed environment, so that means you don't have to worry too much about the effect of outside light, which kind of allows you to set up pretty much anywhere. Flatbed scanners are pretty affordable, though professional models can range up to the $3,000 to $4,000 per scanner. They're fairly easy to learn how to use, and flatbed scanners are great solutions for certain types of materials, such as collections of small unbound flat materials with stable surfaces, and photographic negatives and transparencies. However, flatbed scanners definitely have their limitations. For one, it can be pretty slow in scan speed, depending on the resolution you want to capture. They are not ideal for bound material because of the stress that gets placed on the bindings, or anything that is warped or has dimension to it, like an old parchment. And anything with friable media on its surface, such as a charcoal or a pastel drawing or a painting that's beginning to flake. Because you would have to put it upside down on the scan bed, and it comes in direct contact with the equipment. And then, of course, you're also limited to the size of the scan bed. So any oversized material in your collection would need to be imaged in another way. The scanning software that comes with your scanner may have some limitations. So I recommend using a third-party software such as Silverfast or ViewScan, which will provide a lot more customization in your scanning options. These programs usually come with a built-in calibration software, so you can color calibrate your scanner easily at the start of each session. And for image editing and processing software, I highly recommend the Adobe Creative Cloud, which will come with Photoshop, Lightroom, Bridge, and Acrobat Reader, along with some other programs. And if you're a nonprofit, you can get discounted rates through TechSoup.org, which I have the link up there. And if you're interested in optical character recognition, or OCR, which basically creates text searchable documents from typed materials, I would recommend Adobe Acrobat or Abby Fine Reader are both good options, and we actually use both programs at the center. So when you're shopping for a scanner, keep in mind the physicality of the materials that you need to digitize. So look at the size of the scan bed that you need to accommodate your items. Look at the resolution that the scanner can achieve, and make sure that the scanner can capture at the bit depth and color space options that you need. You want to look for one that has the ability to scan film and transparencies if you need that as well. And make sure that it's compatible with any third-party scanning software that you want to use. Also check the return policy, because you definitely want to test your scanner with a variety of materials to make sure the scanner is giving you accurate results. There's lots of options on the market that vary widely in budget. For bigger projects, I would recommend investing in a more professional level scanner with a large scan bed, which will give you the ability to scan negatives and transparencies and multiple documents at once, if you have those in your collection. And then also on the slide here, I'm including a link to the Library of Congress, which has some good tips for evaluating scanner specifications. I do see a couple questions that I'll try to read here. Are there any open source programs that you recommend? For image editing and scanning software, I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that and maybe send a couple recommendations along with our follow-up links. And I have a couple more technical scanning formatting questions. I'm not totally sure off the top of my head, but I can follow up with you all individually. And I will talk about color calibration in just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and move on and talk about camera and copy stand setups. So I have a snapshot of one of CCAHA's studios here as an example. This is certainly a more complex setup than a flatbed scanner, and consists of two lights, which here in the photo on the top, these are equipped with umbrellas, but you can also use soft boxes. A digital camera, which is tethered to a computer, a copy stand, which is the pole that the camera is mounted to. And this one has very handy measurement markings and is motorized, so we can move that camera up and down just by pushing a button. And a table or a surface to put the objects on. In this picture, you'll see we also have another light to the left, but that is what we use in our conservation photography to capture raking light. And that's not necessary in a digitization project. Also on the slide are a couple of examples of book cradles and easels that can be set up with the copy stand, and that can make it easier for scanning books. There's lots of advantages to this kind of setup. This kind of setup is very versatile, so it can be used to image lots of different types of material. And depending on the camera resolution, you can capture very large items in just a single image. The capture time itself is very fast. It's just done in however long it takes to press the shutter. The studio is a modular setup, which means you can replace or repair parts of it without replacing the whole setup. And then one of the major advantages is that the equipment has no contact with the artifact, which makes it a good choice for fragile materials and materials with dimension. In this photo here, our photographer is photographing a parchment that has some warping and dimension to it. So that would not be ideal for a flatbed scanner. Oh, great, here's a link in the chat box for an open source image editing software. Thank you. Okay. So a camera and copy stand setup can also be used to capture books easily, especially if you have one of the book easels or cradles that I had on the previous slide. And the camera can be taken off the copy stand and mounted to a tripod to capture different angles of your materials, to show the physicality of books or to digitize 3D objects in your collection. And it can also be outfitted to capture negatives by adding a macro lens and photographing the negatives over a light box. Some of the drawbacks to this system are that it is expensive. There's no real getting around that. And as I said last week, investing in equipment requires an ongoing commitment to maintenance and a replacement schedule. It's not truly a one-time expense. The camera and copy stand system has a bit of a higher learning curve. There's different components that require some more technical expertise and more variables that you need to control. So consistent and even lighting from correct angles. You need to be conscious of the color of the walls in the studio, the distance of lighting from the object, and the white balance of the camera and things like that. Supporting software for this setup is similar to the Flatbed scanner with the addition of the need to process raw files. This will allow you to make batch adjustments to exposure and color balance and cropping before you create your final files. And when you work with raw files, you gain a lot of flexibility in processing and creating output files like TIFFs and JPEGs. Lightroom is good for this and comes with the Adobe Creative Suite. And then again, we have the GIMP software that is linked in the chat box. Your camera will also likely come with its own proprietary raw file processing software, so you can certainly use that as well. And what to look for in equipment. In your camera, you're looking for the highest resolution camera you can afford, especially if you have larger artifacts. So look at the pixel dimensions that are listed in the equipment specifications. And the higher those dimensions are, the more resolution you will get. In a lens, your biggest concerns are focus and evenness and exposure. So you want to invest in a good lens that is sharp and does not create images that are in focus at the center, but softer at the edges, or an effect called vignetting. A good lens here is just as important as the camera body itself. And if you invest in a good lens, you should be able to use it for a long time. So when you're investing in this kind of equipment, make sure you're able to test it out. The same thing with the Flatbed scanners. But when you're testing your camera, make sure that the light exposure and focus, again, is even at all four edges in your photo as well as at the center. And also check for any digital artifacts such as spots or rogue pixels or dark areas. In your copy stand, your security is the most important issue. It must be very stable and heavy enough to support your camera and not shift around once you have it locked into position. And motorized copy stands are a plus if you have lots of different types of material and if your budget allows for it. And lighting can be either continuous illumination or a strobe, but the most important thing you're looking for here is that the light is well balanced and even. So these two options that I just talked about are pretty versatile and can be used for a wide variety of materials. But I did want to mention just a few options for dedicated scanning for specific types of material. So first is oversized scanners. And these basically work as an upside down flatbed scanner where the object sits on a large motorized platform and is slowly passing under the scanning equipment. These pieces of equipment are expensive and take up a lot of room. So unless you have a large and growing collection of oversized materials like maps, it would probably make more sense to outsource this type of work rather than purchasing specialized equipment. Book scanners are overhead scanners, and these can make a lot of sense if you have a large book collection like a library. And film scanners produce high quality scans and may offer faster scan speeds than a flatbed scanner. But like the oversized scanner, unless you have a very large collection of negatives, I think you're better off using a more versatile tool, like a flatbed scanner or photography camera and copy stand setup to capture your negative. Okay, so we've looked at a few different studio setup options. So now I want to briefly discuss calibration targets and equipment calibration. One of the most important things you need a target for is color calibration. So a color target for digital imaging will come with assigned digital values. So the idea is that you can scan or photograph the target and then create custom profiles based on how the equipment is reading the target. Software that comes with the targets can usually create custom profiles automatically. So on the bottom image is an example of what this looks like in Silverfast, where the program is analyzing the target. And you can also assess the targets yourself. You can neutralize color cast by using a white balance tool in your image processing program, and assess the exposure and contrast by looking at different color patches and ensuring that they match their assigned values. But if your chart is reading way off than it should be, it's always best to calibrate your camera settings and lighting as much as possible before making the adjustments digitally. And you want to make your digital adjustments to white balance and exposure to be minimal, just to make sure you're getting the best level of accuracy. Okay. I see a couple more questions coming in, and I will try to go through all those at the end. So in episode 3 of this series, we talked about file specifications, and we looked at the federal agency's Digitization Guidelines Initiative, or FADGI document, for guidance on things like file type, resolution, and bit depth for digitizing different types of materials. The FADGI guidelines also provide specific recommendations for assessing how accurately your equipment is reproducing the original at proven levels by assessing various measurement parameters. And this is important for government agencies, but they can also be used to help guide your own equipment calibration even further than a color chart can. So the metrics that are assessed to ensure that you're digitizing in compliance with the FADGI guidelines include tone response, white balance, illuminance uniformity, color accuracy, contrast, scale accuracy, and sharpening. In order to measure for these, you'll need specialized targets that look like this. The device level target for reflective materials is on the left, and the target for transmissive materials is on the right. So you would photograph or scan these targets using whatever equipment and settings that you'll be using for your project. And then you take these image files and analyze them using a software program. One program is called OpenDice, which is free and open source, and it's developed and made available through the Library of Congress. And the other is called Golden Thread, which is proprietary and developed by Image Science Associates. And they have added customer support that can help you work with the program. I don't want to get too into the weeds here on DICE target analysis, but I'm including a resource here, which was written by Image Access, which is a scanner manufacturer. So it does kind of focus on their own products. But aside from that, I think it does do a good job at looking at different FADGI metrics and providing some tips on scanner calibration using those targets. So I'm saying all of this about FADGI metrics because I think it's good to know about and strive for these levels of quality control. But I will say it's not necessarily easy to achieve. The equipment that can demonstrate compliance with these metrics has to be top of the line and may require a lot of staff time and technical expertise. But if you want to digitize in-house, I don't think you should be discouraged if you're not measuring your equipment calibration at this level. There are lots of things you can do to ensure a successful digitization project, including color calibration using a color chart and a visual inspection for sharpness and contrast and digital artifacts. That will go a long way. And proper planning, selecting appropriate file specifications, having good metadata, quality control, and digital collection management procedures, all of the other things we discussed in this series are all much more important to your project in the long run. That said, if it is important to you and your institution to demonstrate to stakeholders that you are scanning at the highest possible level, then just keep in mind that this will require a significant and ongoing investment for your staffing and your equipment budget. Or you can outsource to a vendor who can demonstrate FADG compliance. So I know today's discussion covered the topic of equipment selection quite broadly. I will try to address some of the questions in the chat and follow up via emails for more of the technical questions. But the reason for that is I know that you all have very diverse collections out there, but I hope that I've been able to provide some good food for thought here. I also know that I have by no means covered all topics related to digitization in this series. So I'd like to invite you all to add into the chat box any topics you'd like to see covered in possible future episodes in this series. So I'll keep an eye on that, and then I'll kind of go back and answer some questions that I can, and we'll take it from there. I do see there's one comment here, Capture One cultural heritage software is super. I do agree with that. That is an expensive piece of software, but it has, it can make your workflow very efficient, especially with the auto cropping and auto rotation feature. Let's see. Yes, there's a question here about budget. And I know that that's always an issue, especially for smaller museums and institutions. Yeah, and a good quality point and shoot camera and a flatbed scanner can really go a long way. And I also would recommend looking out for grant opportunities to fund digitization projects. And maybe we can even do an episode on that with one of our development staff. Okay, we got a topic idea, how to preserve a digital archive on public. Great. Cool, yeah. Bare basics for the low budget museum, I like that. And then we have, yeah, it seems that this isn't going to all of the attendees. But I'll take some of these recommendations that are in the chat and add them out to the email that goes out to all participants. Cool, yeah. How to write guidelines on all of these topics. Topic on handling during digitization, that's great, yeah, and we can bring some of our conservators into that discussion. Microfilm scanning, cool. Sharing digitized materials, yeah, we could do a talk on discoverability and access. That's a huge topic right now. Awesome, these are all great ideas. Thank you guys. Oh, oversized flatbed scanners for architectural drawings. Yeah, Rebecca, I'll put you in touch with someone. I'll follow up with you via email. There's one question here. What about using a high-end copier for scanning? I think that would be okay for just normal paper documents, but for anything where you need correct color information and you want to make sure you're not, squashing it on a copier, I think that would be okay for certain materials. Digitizing negatives, excellent. Thanks everyone for watching this series. This was a new format we were trying out with the shorter webinars in a series instead of one long webinar. So it's been really fun chatting with you all these past 6 weeks, and I look forward to putting together some more episodes for you. Thank you.